these soldiers. I don't want to hear anybody say anything about my hair today, okay? I know, I'm growing out a pixie cut in quarantine, which is an experience. I have about a militia's worth of bobby pins in my head, and it still looks like I have a mullet, okay? I'm going through a weird time of my life right now. I feel like this look is purely my 19-year-old soft goth grunge self coming through today, which is why I have like a good Morticia Addams sleeve and like one of these stretchy boys on. I have no idea how I'm gonna do this video because I haven't scripted anything, written anything down, but it's just been on my mind for the last couple of days and we're just gonna wing it. We'll see what happens. This sort of started because of some discussions that I've been having with people on TikTok, of all places, about how books can mean different things to different people, and regardless if it's a good book or it has maybe some problematic themes in it, sometimes you can kind of put those aside and say this book was really important to me at a certain part of my life, or I really connected with the main character despite maybe they're not making the greatest decisions. I am oddly specifically attached to certain books that I have in my repertoire, just for like weird or dumb or interesting reasons. I thought it'd be interesting to continue that conversation and like move it over to this side of the internet and like leave down below what you think of these books, or if you yourself have a certain like thought or feeling towards something. I don't know, I just find like connection and like the ways that people attach themselves to objects very interesting. Without further ado, and in no particular order, here is a stack of books that I have odd emotional attachments to. I know I said in no particular order, but I am going to start off with one that I read in like early high school that I tracked down a copy of later in my life, and that is The Golden Book of Fairy by O.R. Melling, which, as I have found, is actually out of print. So I had to track down a copy of this on the internet and paid a ridiculous markup for it. This is a compendium of 4 sort of middle grade books that all deal with different people and the land of fairy, and like all their stories eventually come together and they all meet up in the 4th book, which is kind of cool. And I honestly do credit this book as being the book that got me into all the fairy lore that I love so much today. I even have a tattoo of this, and I will insert a picture now. It's on my ankle. Says follow the green way, which is something that is near and dear to my heart. If you take the left or like the wrong, the sinister path, that will lead you to the land of fairy. And this also kindled my love for Celtic folklore. So just this is where I learned like a lot of Irish words that I'm most likely pronouncing wrong. And then another book that I found from my high school library that I read, never found again, and then almost had an anxiety attack right then and there in the thrift store when I found it. That was also featured in my last thrift haul. Is it over there? Maybe it's, where's the cart? I don't know. With the confidence of a straight white man, I'm gonna say that it's up there, so you can check that out if you like. But it is The Riddles Epsilon by Christine Morton Shaw, which I do not have a tattoo of, but this symbol here has haunted my dreams for the last like decade. This is about a girl who moves to a small town on the sea and then finds this ancient book and has to undo these riddles. And also there's a boy who might be dead. Check this out and reread it and reread it and reread it over and over again. And I just have such like, I don't know, this just feels like a myth unto itself. And now I have it in my hands. I don't quite know what to do with myself. Next up is a book that, I mean, I've talked so much about, and I'm pretty sure that you know this just from looking at me, just from like peeking over in that corner of books over there, and that is this particular copy of The City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. To this day, I have never seen another one of these like mini trade paperback. What is the word for this small? I haven't worked at a bookstore in like 2 years and my book knowledge is just shot. I've never seen one in this format before, and I just want to show you. Like, look at those spine creases. Oh yeah, oh, I enjoyed myself thoroughly with this series. Yes, I realize there are some issues with this book and with this world and some things that she said in like the beginning of the series. I get it. And you know what? I acknowledge it and then I move on, but I still have such good feelings about this series because it was the first book that I ever read in that formative time in my life when I was moving on to young adult, who had a character with red hair who was like kicking ass and taking names, and there was a sexy blonde boy who, like, from a fantasy world, he thought that she was really hot. What can I say? Also, I went to a book signing of Cassandra Clare's years back, and when I went there, I think I was one of the only redheads in the audience. And then, when I went up to the table to meet her, she said that I look how Clary looks in her head. So, it's canon. Cassandra Clare says that I am Clary. HBO, where's my movie deal? Honestly, with the knowledge that I have, I think I could be a better protagonist than Clary would, finding out that there's a secret world out there of shadow hunters. I wear enough black as it is. I can be stealthy when I want to. I can't wield a sword, but like, we can figure it out. Another young adult book series that I have very strong feelings towards is Uglies by Scott Westerfeld, which I can confidently say was the first young adult series that I ever read. And this was also one of the first times that I read this like resort resourceful protagonist who didn't really care about boys, who was going off on her own and having adventures and fighting back and fighting the government and all that good sci-fi stuff. And I also got to meet Scott Westerfeld and have him sign my book because I ran the event that he had when he came to Vancouver a couple years ago for when Imposters came out, and that was so cool to be like, oh my god, you! And he's actually really cool, so it's great that like meeting your hero didn't detract from the enjoyment that I got from this series. I also find this is just a really good gender neutral book to get people into reading. Like, I would recommend this all the time. His series have kind of fallen by the wayside, but I love it so much, and I like try to keep that spark alive, you know? Speaking of book events, the reason that I have such fond memories of Witches of Ash Roan by E. Latimer is because I know her! She's my friend! See, this one's signed and it says, "To my friend, a business witch." That's me! That was the book that I got sent as, like, PR ahead of time, but this is the book that I actually got from the event. Like, see? That's her! That's my friend! And, if you see, it says, "To the word nerds!" And I'm a part of the word nerds! Erin and I met a long time ago online, and we are both part of a vlogging group, the Word Nerds, in case you didn't know, my second channel. It's linked in my channel linked box with the other profile. I got to read, like, the beta drafts of this, so it's really cool to see it, the whole process, and like have it in my hand, and the fact that this was the final event that I went to before lockdown happened last March. She like just squeaked one in, and it was a great event, but it was the last time that I was in a bookstore for a book event, and I missed it so much, but I'm glad that that was like the final reckoning of my book event journey over the last couple years. Oh, and speaking of events, here's the third of the trilogy of events, and that is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I have a tricky history with this book because when I first read it, I didn't like it. And then, when we had Victoria Aveyard once again come to the bookstore that I worked at, it was for when Warstorm was coming out. So I was like, well, I gotta read the whole thing, so I read the whole series before the event, and oh my god, I fell in love with this so much. I ran the whole event, so I got to meet her, and I can honestly say Victoria Aveyard is a very sweet person, and I really enjoyed talking to her. I also enjoyed getting my book signed. And the event for Warstorm was one of the first big author events that I ran myself as like the event coordinator, and like I had a crew and I had a team and I was the person putting the whole thing together, which was a great experience, and I'm glad I did, and I did that for a lot of other book events, but this was like the first big one, so it's like this, you know, good feelings, good vibes. So this book, I think, is just a good book overall, but I have interesting thoughts and feelings towards it because of how and where I got it, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sappa Tahir. The old cover. This came out in 2015, and it was this like, ooh, the new big thing, right? It was like, ooh, Roman folklore and Arabian folklore, and I had my eye on this for like months before it came out. And then, this is when I was still in the midst of my modeling career, and I went to Milan for 2 months, and I found this book in the tiny English book section at this one big bookstore that was across from the Duomo, which was like, I freaked out, and people were probably like looking at me as like the foreigner just like losing her mind inside of an Italian bookstore. You know, if that's what I'm known for, I'm not mad at it. I think I got this like the first week that I was there, so it was just nice to have that kind of thing of like, you know, like a reminder of home. Like, books are just truly universal and you can have a bookish experiences no matter where you are in the world, blah 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 sentiment. I reread this thing to death. I don't know if I could quote it word for word anymore, but I'm pretty sure I could after the first couple weeks because I didn't want to buy a lot of books to make my suitcase heavier, but I did anyway. But this is the only one that's like survived as long as it has, so technically this is like a foreign book, you know, very exciting. Okay, next up is one that I always laugh at because Dark Lover by J.R. Ward is a vampire romance novel that I read way too young. I got this out of the library during my teen vampire phase. It's okay, we all have one, you can admit it, this is a safe space. But honestly, this holds up. This series is amazing, and I will not ever stop pushing this on people who want like a good vampire romance novel. In my time, I have read many a vampire or paranormal romance cover, and they're all kind of trashy. Like, they're just, I don't know. It's all about like the sexy times with an otherworldly being whose only purpose in the novel is just to have big boobs and make the protagonist want to screw something and isn't human. This series, I mean, yes, it sort of does have that, but this is one of the most unique worlds I've ever read. The vampires don't fight werewolves or ghosts or anything. They fight these other beings called lessers, which are like these creatures that have their hearts cut out, and they have like this dark one. There's this whole vampire religion that they can like talk to their god with during like various ceremonies. There's this whole hierarchy of vampire aristocracy, like how that plays into vampire culture, like the warrior caste of vampires, particularly the Black Dagger Brotherhood, which was this whole series is made on. There's amazing representation for deafness, blindness, mental illness, disability, PTSD, lots of queer characters, diversity, like it's just so good. But the funny part is that this was written in the 90s, so there is a lot of 90s slang. Nothing derogatory though, which is actually pretty good. But hilariously enough, everyone is wearing leather pants and Doc Martens, and I find that really funny. And lastly is a book that I've talked about so many times, and I will continue to talk about it for so many other times in the near and upcoming future, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I know most of you are probably very tired of me talking about this by now, but you gotta listen to why. Another instance of when this first came out, I read it, didn't really like it, thought it was kind of weird, but as I have grown and aged and wizened, I have opened my eyes to the subgenre of magic realism and like light fantasy. This whole series means so much to me, so much so that I have a tattoo, and the rest of the series over here just keeps getting better and better. Again, there are some like small issues in this series, especially with the fourth book, but it's okay. I acknowledge it, we move on. This is some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever read in my life. The characters are so real, the way that they interact as they learn to all love one another. I think their connections are just so real and raw and beautiful, and the way that her imagery is just, it's stunning. Everything is just so deep and like pulls you into this book. And considering this is a book about four friends hunting for Welsh kings on this ley line that's all built on magic and wanting and wishes and weird things with time, which are all things that I love to read about, this has been time well spent. And I know a lot of people don't like this series, but it's okay. It means something to me that maybe it doesn't mean something to you. Maybe you just don't like Welsh kings. I mean, you're wrong. Okay, if you don't like that, but just know I will not hear anything about my tattoo. I love it, so that's all that really matters to me. I hope you can't hear that, but my neighbor just turned on a very loud idling engine. Thanks, neighbor. Not trying to, you know, create entertainment over here or anything. I thought about this book after I finished filming this video, so I don't know where I'm gonna insert this. Maybe it's here, maybe it's the actual end book, maybe it's like the beginning book, I don't know. But the book I forgot about until literally I was putting away my camera equipment was Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. Yes, oh, she's twice on this list. Snaps for her. This is the third of her Infernal Devices series, which is a historical Shadowhunter book, which I love me some fantasy, magic, historical shenanigans, but I think that all of you know by now, Will, Tessa, and Jim stole my heart. This book was the first book that I had a meltdown over. I have a collector's first edition. I got this the day it came out. I read this more times than I can count. Oh, that rhymed. English major. I stand by what I say about this book being the only book that I've ever read that does a love triangle the right way. You can see how much it's born of friendship and love and respect, and the fact that there are some very tragic characters in here like doesn't help that fact. I love the particular time that this story is set in that world, and if you know the ending of this, you know, I cried my eyes out. It was also 4 a.m. when I finished this book, which might have something to do with it. I was crying so hard at the end of this book, so early in the morning because I binged it in one go, and I think that experience of reading until 4 a.m. both gave me the hole in my heart and filled the hole in my heart. So there you have it. There are a list of books that I have odd attachments to. Another video that I did that I'm also going to confidently point in that corner that the card is at, that was about like books that traumatized me as a child. So it's like, it's just different kinds of connections, you know? Like I do have connections to things that made me upset or sad, but they're not quite the same as ones that I have like good associations with. Like I'm also not the kind of person who buys multiple copies of the same book. I say as I realize I have 3 of a darker shade of magic over here, and like 4 of the City of Bones. I'm a hypocrite, but I know some people have like 12 different copies of the same book if it gets like every new cover comes out, but like I don't do that yet, sort of. It's a slippery slope. Tea is cold, my throat is dry, the sun is going down, not that there was really any sun to begin with because it's winter and I haven't felt the sun on my face for like months. As you can tell from the vampire pallor of my skin, you know where to click to like the video, you know where to click to subscribe. I hope you guys are all having a nice day wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!